we hold the precepts, we practice various forms of concentration and meditation with the idea that eventually by doing that, we will gain insight or prajna or wisdom, but it's not seamless. Sometimes the foundation's a little weak. The precepts aren't exactly right on. Therefore, the concentration isn't really on. And then the insights are a little bit, you could say, twisted, distorted, foggy, as if seen through a glass darkly. And the precepts is very tricky because to make this really work, to get the insight that Fa Da is looking for, as the Shurangama says, the mind has to be as clear as glistening frost and as straight as lute strings. That was a really wonderful metaphor. I mean, good lute strings. You can have bad guitars where the strings are all over the place, but straight as lute strings, pure as glistening frost. And what this is indicating is that it's a kind of total attunement of one's mind and body and speech. And the most important, of course, is the mind. We can hold precepts and regulate our physical behavior and keep it from harming others and doing damage. And we can even become very mindful of our speech. Now, this is not as easy as it sounds, but we can do it. It's doable. Some people do it by shutting up. And that works for a while because what it does is reveal where the speech is coming from before it gets out. And this is a good expedient practice to see what's the effect of my words. Do I really talk in a significant way, or am I a lot of times just babbling or gossiping or, fault finding or various things? And so sometimes taking a vow of silence helps clarify what's going on before the words come out, because they'll arise, but if they don't come out, it's like they're projected on a screen and you can see them really clearly, and also you can probably anticipate the effects of them. So it's a way to purify speech, periodic times of silence. But the mind itself, this is the one that's very difficult to get a handle on, to quote, get as straight as lute strings, because it's accumulation of so many habits and thoughts and feelings and emotions that it's just often feels like a hurricane or a typhoon. And you notice this when you sit in meditation. All of a sudden it becomes very pronounced what's going on in that dimension before speech and even before action. But it is considered karma. So intentional activity of the mind is a very profound form of karma. This is one of the three karmas. So what the Shurangama was talking about here is particularly, you can be pure, talked about in four aspects, that you're regulating your sexual desires, you're regulating your harming of life, you're pulling back from making a footprint in the matrix of living beings that's harming, that's unhealthy, that's unwholesome, that's ripping off, killing in the most degree form, but even compromising life, deteriorating life, creating conditions that make life hard to live. So you could say, oh, it's got an environmental part here, because if you are harming the living environment that supports life, although you're not actually taking life of living beings, you are indirectly undermining the life support system that is required for them. And so you really have to, you get into this level of saying, well, I'm a vegetarian, I don't kill. Or some people say, I'm a kind of vegetarian, I don't kill anything before I eat it. But if it's offered to me, I'll eat it. So it's like, well, I went to McDonald's and I didn't kill that, so okay. But if you get into this level of not killing and not harming, you're asking, actually, how is my lifestyle, my very lifestyle itself, supporting, liberating life, or hampering and reducing life? And that's a different reflection. You could still be a vegetarian, but you could think, I'm living in a culture where, because of the inordinate amount of natural resources I draw on, and sometimes I got a little bothered because I was reading these articles that even in using massive use of computers in the devices, draw on energy, massive amounts of energy. So they seem like clean things to do rather than printing, but the amount of energy they draw and the energy that's used to support that electrical grid that does this cuts into things like the rainforest and petroleum and coal and so forth. And you kind of think, wow. So you're making connections between your individuality, your individual place in any part of the world, and then the ramifications, both in and out. And this sense of interconnectivity is sometimes called Indra's net, the sense that we are all interconnected in various ways, and each action that we make correspondingly has ramifications that affect others and so forth. So when you go into the precepts, say simply like that, then you're getting into precepting the mind, precepting the nature. And so this is what the Shrang was moving for. So maybe with Fada, one of the things that the Shrang was talking about is if you sort of reduce your desires and reduce that harming impulse, be careful what you want and seek, because that's a kind of karma. It's an intentionality. And the Upanishads are very clear about this. If you want something, if you desire something, it will turn into a will, an intention to get it, which will then turn into an action to go after it, which then produces effects that basically define your life and your destiny. So if you want to change your destiny, the Upanishad says, you have to go back to that ground where that desire moves at first, and you really have to get a handle on this. So here what the Shurangama was talking about is, even if you are pure in many ways, if you're still, let's use this language, lusting for enlightenment, or craving bodhi, or craving spiritual heightened states, this desire itself then means your lute strings are not straight. And there's a little muck in the frost, because this will lead to the same mind that hankers after other things. This is really interesting. It's not per se the object of your desire. It's the subject that desires that is the obstacle. So you have to be careful, because some people think, all I want to do is get enlightened. And I mean, this weekend I'm going up and following Hung Sure to the Sudana Center for one day, and I'm really he's up there, the whole thing is really great, and I'm gonna get enlightened in that day. And actually I have to do it because Sunday I have to get back to watch football games. So Saturday I got to get enlightened, and so you get into this mode and you go up there with this hunger, right? And you're sitting there, and pretty soon there's someone next to you going, and you're going, damn it, you're interrupting my enlightenment. Stop it. And pretty soon you get really afflicted because I got to get it today. So the Shurangama is pointing to, if you even hanker after Bodhi, awakening, are desiring Buddhahood, it becomes a kind of impurity, and in the sense that it distorts your intentionality. So this is important to sort of get into. So Fada has been reciting, he's been doing a particularly Dharma practice, and yet there was something off in his practice. And the Sixth Patriarch went right to it, didn't waste time, and said, your basic problem is you are seeing everything through yourself. And you're reciting with the idea that this shows that you're a great cultivator, because you've recited 3,000 times for over 10 years. And believe me, this is not a small accomplishment. Not a small accomplishment. And try it. Next 10 years, just do this and see what happens. I was just saying, it's really, really an outstanding practice. Yet, something in his intentionality, which is then plays into his expectation, has caught him stuck. And so one way he's stuck is that he thinks, and he's hoping the Sixth Patriarch will say, wow, superb, really good. And he doesn't do that. And then he's stuck in the sense that he kind of doesn't really get the text. So he's been reciting it, but he hasn't been pondering its meaning at all. And so the point the Sixth Patriarch is saying, what's the purpose of a text? He's kind of like, what's the purpose of a sutra? Is it an object of worship that you put on the shelf and you bow to? Or is it the words of enlightened beings that are sort of far out and metaphysical and really, wow? What is the purpose of it? Why is it taught? Why is it even written down? And of course, with the Sixth Patriarch saying, it's written down to stimulate and remind you of your deep spiritual nature. It's written down, it's presented as a map or a manual of realizing your own awakened nature. It's meant to be picked up and done, not simply bowed to. And he's been bowing to it. So the sutra, then the passage then says, he's humbled. He realizes now that he's got this character flaw. And he also realizes, he said on page 68, I've been reciting this, but I haven't penetrated it. All along, I've only been reciting it by rote, but I haven't gotten the main purport. Maybe even think they had to get the main purport, or there was a main purport to get. And so now he goes into it and he says, will you help me out? Help me understand the text. So there's an opening now. He's a little docile, maybe a little, how should I say, childlike almost, in the sense that he's dropped the veneer of his pride and so forth. And so he starts reading to the Sixth Patriarch. He comes to this chapter called the chapter Parables. I'm just sort of bringing this up to speed here. And it talks about what's called the one great matter, and the Sixth Patriarch says, stop, that's it. And of course, if you read the text, you'd say, this is like neon lights, right? I mean, you're coming to blah, 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 and it's like the one great matter, blah, blah, lights go on. What's the one great matter? And I mentioned there's two ways to perceive the one great matter. They're interrelated, but it has to do with why you would want or wish or be inclined to go deeper into the meaning of life, because the one great matter has to do with the inexorable truth that we're born only to age, fade away, and die. Nobody escapes that. And so this is the quandary. This is the existential quandary that cuts across time, cultures, gender, everything. We are all in that boat together. In between, we do all sorts of things. You know, some of us are poor, some of us are rich, some of us get a couple PhDs, some of us drop out, some of us start successful businesses, some of us go bankrupt. Some of us, after going bankrupt, run for public office. No, I'm not going to editorialize. Okay, so regardless, you know, it's a boat. It's like the ship of fools. If you know that poem or metaphor. Let me see, who is that? Is that Alexander Pope? Ship of Fools. It's a famous Renaissance poem image. Anyhow, basically it's describing humanity as a ship of all different people and whatnot, but basically they're all fools. And the captain is drunk and, you know, out of it, and nobody's really in charge of the ship, and it's just meandering on the ocean, and everybody's sort of having a good time thinking it's going somewhere, but it's going nowhere. And in a sense, what the Sixth Patriarch or the Buddha saying in the Lotus Sutra is, we are all of us on a ship, and we're fools, or we're all in a burning house, and we don't know it's burning down, which is the Parables chapter. And then he says it's because of this one great matter, and yet we forget the one great matter, or more probably psychologically true, we try to deny it. It's really funny. Even when it hits us right between the face. For example, someone close to you dies, very close to you, a brother, a mother, father, sister, a loved one. And immediately, the one great matter is right between the eyebrows. It's really right there. One, because, wow, there they were, and now they're not. I can remember as I was holding my own mother when she passed away, and there was this, the breath was there, the eye contact occasionally was there, the warmth was there. I was comforting her, and then the last breath just stopped, and there wasn't any more breath. And in the pulse stopped. There was no more pulse. And it was just like she had gone from a living, breathing, three-dimensional being to, I don't mean to be coarse, but an inert piece of clay almost. The vitality was gone from the body. It's an amazing experience if you've ever had that directly. And no matter what you do, you realize that's it. You're not going to bring this back, and you're trying, where did it go? Where did it go? And not only do you feel, I felt this loss because of all the people in my life. My mother was the only one that saw me through all my difficulties and kept telling me what a good guy I was. Even if it wasn't true, I could always count on her for, you know, reaffirming you're good, you're a good boy, and blah, blah, blah. Oh, thank you. You're smart, you know, okay. Even though I flunked tests and what. So all of a sudden that unconditional support was gone. And I really felt it. But then I also felt, wait a minute, just as her mother brought her in and her mother's gone, and she brought me in and she's gone, whoa, that means that I too will in some point be at this state. What's this about? And so what I'm saying is, when that happens, it's right there, and it's like you're philosophical to the core now. And Plato said this is really the driving force of all philosophy, is to have understanding and the ability to face the inevitable truth of our death. This is what philosophy was investigating. And yet, within weeks, months, sometimes a year it takes, this starts to fade. It starts to fade. The immediacy of that fades, and you just, quote, move on. But it's not just you move on, you move out of awareness. So moving on is okay. I'm not saying you should sit there and wallow. But the awareness itself goes, and it doesn't just go evaporate, it goes because we push it out because it's so hard to deal with. And so it's sort of like, on one hand, it's an absolute truth that we are in the midst of every day, and yet we pull away from it. So this kind of avoidance or denial is one of the mechanisms for dealing with the one great matter, and it's fairly common. And I'm not trying to say, oh, that's bad. I'm just saying it is human to do this. And what Hui Neng is saying here, what the text is saying here, this is where teachers and mentors come in. And in this particular text, he's saying the Buddha appears, or Buddhas manifest, sages, enlightened beings put themselves forward as healthy reminders to us to take this seriously and wake up in the midst of and dream, and not wake until that last couple breaths is going to think, gee, what was this all about? And did I do something meaningful, or did I just go through the motions here? Blah, blah, blah. And so they have an unwelcome task. And again, to some sense, you go back, you look at Socrates, who took it upon himself to do something like this. And, they poison him. So it's like, okay. And he would call himself a gadfly. And that's the kind of fly that buzzes around you and bothers you. Doesn't let you sort of, on a picnic, the flies are always there or something. And the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas walk this fine line between gathering in and being compassionate and kind and sticking it to you, stirring it up a little bit. And there's this dynamic tension. So as a result, Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and sages have to be very clear, independent, and unattached, or otherwise they won't be able to do this work. Because if they're seeking rewards or applause from people, it will impede what they're going to get. And if they're fearing rejection or animosity from people, they won't be able to deliver the message and so forth. So there's a real independent strength that comes from being. And so the Sixth Patriarch that goes on, but he does a very interesting thing here. He tells Fada that the knowledge and vision of a Buddha, of awakened one, is not talking about Shakyamuni Buddha or Vipassana Buddha or some other Buddha. It's talking about him. Whoa. So what he does is he takes this text here and says, the knowledge and vision is not the knowledge and vision of Buddha, because why would that be? And it's got a great line here, right on the bottom of page 69. He says, don't think this is describing the Buddha's knowledge and vision, a knowledge of vision that we do not share in. If you interpret it this way, you discredit the sutra to mean the Buddha, because the Buddha is already awakened and perfect in knowledge and vision. What would there be need to do it again? So he's saying, okay, so this must be about someone else's knowledge and vision. Who could that be? It's you, Fada. Oh, then that's why he has this line, a very important line, you should now believe that the knowledge and vision of the Buddha is just your own mind. There is no other Buddha. Now, I want to be careful here, because I left it here last week with the text, and some of you might have had some thoughts about this. I certainly did. Did anybody have any thoughts about this? Well, come on. No thoughts. Okay, so that's one question. How can this mind, this thing here, be the knowledge and vision of the Buddha, the unattached, liberated, totally omniscient state? That's a little hard stretch. And if you think it's really, really close, you might want to wonder about pride or arrogance, But that's one thing. That's not what I wondered about. I wondered about some. Well, let me read on and see if it triggers something. Okay. We're picking it up. It's only because living beings cover over their own light. Now we're reading the text from the bottom of 69. It's only because living beings cover over their own light with lust and craving for sensory experiences, become enslaved to things outside and disturbed within. And it's only because of this, he says, that the world honor one, which is another title for the Buddha, is roused from his samadhi to exhort them to cease and not to seek outside themselves, instead realize they are the same as the Buddha. Thus, the sutra says or speaks, realizing Buddha's knowledge and vision. Okay, anything here? Okay, I'll jump. Maybe I'm too skeptical and I think too much. But it says, the previous line says, oh, there is no other Buddha. And now you got the Buddha coming out of samadhi. And you go, wait a minute, yeah, because and I read other texts where there's more than a couple Buddhas. So how many Buddhas are there that are talked about in the text? 1, 2, 3, 10? Anybody seen a number greater than 10 Buddhas? How about there's the 7 Buddhas of antiquity? Whoa, 1,000 Buddhas. 1,000? Can I go in once? Going twice? 10,000. We got a bit here. 10,000 Buddhas. We got 10,000. Any more Buddhas than that? Huh? How many Buddhas? Limitless. Whoa. Whoa. So that's big, right? That's really a lot of Buddhas. Not only is it a lot, but it seems to be without end or limit. So now he's going, there is no other Buddha, and we know from various texts, especially the Amitabhasika, it says there are Buddhas as numerous sand grains in the Ganges. And every mote of dust throughout this universe, not just this world, but worlds beyond measure, in every mote of dust, there are Buddhas turning the Dharma wheel and teaching and transforming. Whoa, whoa, whoa. How many motes of dust is in this room? Okay, so obviously someone's playing with numbers or our mind here, because he says there is no other Buddha, but then says this Buddha and lots of Buddhas arise from. What are we to make of this? Sorry I disturbed this a little bit. But I think it's not unanswerable. I think it's answerable. This is where the philosophy of hermeneutics comes in. And hermeneutics has to do with when something comes that requires further interpretation. It's not just clear in the face of it. Okay? And so how are you to interpret this? Because it could seem like a contradiction. There is no other Buddha, just you're the only Buddha, and then there's these other Buddhas that are rising from samadhi and so forth, and then is dust motes. So some people then just say, it's a contradiction, the teachers are inconsistent. Or, how would we maybe interpret this?
Well, I feel like there's lots of contradictions in this, but they all seem to be purposeful.
Purposeful contradictions, I like that. That's a nice expression. Purposeful.
I'm not sure what some of these contradictions are.
But they seem to be purposeful.
They do.
Or someone would be really dumb to be one sentence say one thing, the next sentence say another thing. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, so how are we going to deal with this? 1, 2, anybody? Don't be shy. Speak up. Venture.
That the Buddha nature for all people is the same.
Mm-hmm.
But all the myriad Buddhas have the same Buddha nature. So
Okay.
It's one, but it's expressed in many.
So what very interesting, what you're saying is when one attains Buddha, small b, that state is the universal state of understanding potential for all living beings. So any possible living being who attains that state is Buddha. And it's not a particular individual. In fact, in the sense that the replication of that awakening experience is one and the same throughout time and space. So that is an interesting explanation to say the one and the many are not obstructing. They're actually different ways of just looking at the same phenomena. Okay? Anybody else? Okay, I'll jump in. I'm just adding, I think one way you have to understand this passage here is to realize that in any particular encounter between the master and the disciple, the master is speaking to the specific particular characteristics and potentials of that disciple at that time. Okay, so here you have to go to context. You have to contextualize it. You don't want to take this out of context and say, there is no other Buddha but me. Yes, at one level, but careful, because then you sort of get into denying all these other phenomena accomplishments. So in this particular case, Fa Da has been looking outside. He's externalized his practice to be looking for something. Either the Sixth Patriarch's going to affirm his state, or some Buddha's going to come at some point and say, great, 3,010 years, move up to the next level, you advance. And so in a sense, he's been reading the text. The text has been turning him rather than him turning the text. And he's not allowed to work on his mind. His mind is actually put it out there. And so what the Sixth Patriarch is saying here is the purpose of this text is to open up your own mind and nature. Therefore, this is the Buddha that's being talked about in this text. It's about you. So at that moment, in a very expedient way, he turns them from outside looking to inward examination. He turns them from looking for the way outside and looking into his own mind and nature, which in fact is the intent of this text, because you remember, this is very interesting. We'll go back to this. Oh, our friend isn't here with the King of Kings, the King of Queens of Sutras and whatnot. So there's one portrayal or one way of rendering the teachings that says when every Buddha, when every being who becomes a Buddha awakens, the very first teaching they give is the Avatamsaka teaching. Okay, but I don't know how many of you have read the Avatamsaka. Anybody here read the Avatamsaka? Parts of the Avatamsaka. A few hands go up. It's really easy to understand, right? No, it is not. I mean, whoa, it's inconceivable in many ways, and it's huge. And what that represents was the Buddha, upon his awakening, realized the truth of that teaching. In other words, it sounds a little funny. What he realized was that teaching is truth. Okay, and that teaching is considered to be the highest expression of the enlightened nature of a awakened being, and also the best expression of the path of the Bodhisattva. And it's the best description of the cosmology and the whole interrelatedness of all worlds throughout the 3 periods of time, and so on and so forth. So it's a really totally encompassing, rich, deep text. What the Buddha found was that most people couldn't get it. Not only that, even bodhisattvas of higher stages of accomplishment couldn't understand it. So the Buddha then paused and said, whoa, wait a minute. Okay, I could speak like this forever, and it's really fun, and I really love this. But everybody's going, or what? And so the point of the medicine transforming wasn't, this medicine was too rich, too inappropriate for them. And so the Buddha then said, went into 300 different assemblies for 49 years of his teaching, and throughout these different gatherings, you can call them ascended, different gatherings, spoke all kinds of different teachings expediently. In other words, to that time, that situation that would cause somebody to move a little bit past where they were to the next level of understanding, but not too much. Because if you go from the, where you are to the Avatamsaka, it's like, not going to happen. But if you go to be a good person, really purify your mind, and you can have the state of the first stage of arhatship. Whoa, okay. And you can actually get going on that. It's very accessible. It's very systematic and so forth. And so he would create, some people he would say, do this, do that, whatnot. And you have a number of teachings promoting different ends. And yet, when he gets to the lotus, which is now coming to the end of this teaching career, he says, okay, I got to cut back to the chase. I've been doing this. And I particularly laid out 3 vehicles for awakening. One called the Shravaka, one called the Pratyeka Buddha, and the other called the Bodhisattva. And now I'm going to tell you these were all expedients. These were all inducements to get you to move along to this, the Buddha nature, that all beings have the Buddha nature and all can become Buddhas. Now, when he did this in the assembly, some people in the assembly weren't ready for it, even though they were very close, and they just walked out. And he said, I can't not do this now because it's time. So if I keep waiting, I won't be able to get everybody. Those that were ready for it got it. So the important part was that Shariputra at this time moved his paradigm. He had a paradigm shift from this Shravaka position he was in, thinking, this is it. And I'm really close. I actually had it. And the Buddha said, sorry, it's just, you're in a little transformation city. This is just a little vacation land. There's more out there. And he was worried, he was doubting and whatnot, but he overcame it and listened to the Buddha, and then with great joy realized that he would go to the next level. And so the Buddha then goes through and explains it's for this one purpose, that all beings have the Buddha nature. Now, the next sutra, the final sutra, the Mahaparinirvana Sutra, and then he says, I asked him for his final teaching, summarize it, give it to us. He said, I never said a word. Whoa. And now we're back to the Avatamsaka. So what's happening here is the Buddha is kind of saying, okay, go for it in your own nature. Fa-da's ready. Fa-da's ready. So we have to particularize this and realize that this particular teaching at this time is for Fa-da. We might not get that. If we say, Hui Neng, sure, you're kind of like, I've been going to the Berkeley Buddhist Monastery, Friday nights and Saturday nights for 6 years, and isn't that great? And he says, yeah, it's good, but what? Well, maybe, you should think about not killing so much and stealing when you leave the monastery. And went, really? Oh, I think I could do that. He didn't say, oh, you're a Buddha. No. So this might not be given to someone at a different stage. And actually, if it's given at a wrong time and inappropriate, it can have the adverse effect, as can medicine. So there's a really great line, a passage. Gosh, you don't have it with you, do you? We just did it. Lankapatara. Do you have it? No. Well, you got it in your mind? No. You might have. Basically, the Buddha says, I have many diverse teachings, and I dole them out or something based on the appropriateness of that situation and that person. And then he says, and if you don't put a teaching out particularly to that, it is in fact not a teaching. Now, another translation is that it should not be taught. However you want to translate it, it's basically saying that is not Dharma. And then the following passage says, just like a skilled physician concocts and dispenses medicine according to the illness, and gives this parallel. So the parallel between the medicine and the teaching is extremely important because it's particularized, individualized to wherever you're hung up. And you can't transfer that and say, the Buddha said this, or this is absolute truth. You always have to get back to what is untying the knot and moving that person along expediently into a greater and greater understanding. So that's one of the reasons. The other thing you can look at here is, just as the Buddha in an earlier passage when he was talking about the Pure Land, and he's saying, recitation of the Pure Land text is a good practice, but it is meant as an inducement to get people to practice deeper and to get back to this ground. So it's not bad, it's just an inducement. So the many Buddhas is also, you could see as a provisional teaching, an inducement to get people moving along and thinking I can go and have teachers and I can appeal to many enlightened sages and so forth. But ultimately, the final teaching is, this is one Buddha. But that's not really the final teaching. So when he says there's no other Buddha, Fa-da is in for a surprise. Because if Fa-da really gets to that ground, Fa-da will go, oh, all Buddhas are not. Okay? Now, I didn't make that up. You're going to say, oh, careful. Professor Verhoeven tonight just denied the existence of Buddhas. I am quoting a passage from the Avatamsaka Sutra. And it says, all Buddhas awaken to Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi and realize that all Buddhas are not. So I'm just saying, think about what that's saying a little bit, because what it's sort of getting at is closer to what I think you were saying. When one attains that state, any mark of an individual identity is already not complete Buddha. And it's not saying that then you just go back to slopping around when it says all Buddhas are not. It's saying when the medicine has been whole and complete and health restored, there's no mark whatsoever. This is the nature. This is the awakened nature. So this is important. You had a question, or?
Yeah, I know. Just to complete what the gentleman was saying, could it be a report between?
A little louder, just.
Could it be a report between chronos and kairos, the linear time and the psychological time? Because we learn things in the psychological time, and sometimes we learn on the clock time, and this is different from person to person.
You can construct it that way, but you know what you're realizing here, what all Buddhas realize. For example, it says all Buddha, they leave their samadhi to come. What's a samadhi?
Well, it's a time and space.
Well, yeah, I know what you're saying, but I'm saying when you look at what the samadhi they're talking about there's a samadhi called the sameness of all time. So what samadhi is a Sanskrit word, but it doesn't. Some people think it means trance, like they enter a trance. But really, I think it's better translated as a sort of a sustained focus attending to the here and now. If there's a sustained focus attending to the here and now, time isn't there. There is no past, there is no future. There's just, and that's what they say when a Buddha or someone awakens to this, they awaken to the that all time is one time and all places, one place is every place. So that's kind of inconceivable, but it's getting around that, even that distinction you're making.
But when you realize your mother was dead,
you realize, yeah.
That was an experience in time, and in a very particular moment, that it was only your experience.
That's right. And yes, it's not.
And yes, it's not.
And so what this is pointing to is to a state or understanding where those distinctions, which are the distinctions of a mind that is trying to set up dualities and grasping and so forth, creates. And so it's saying this mind, this conscious mind, is the same as the enlightened mind, but it's used differently. And when it's used differently like this, it discriminates, it parses, it sets up me, self, other, da-da-da. And so what one is doing in the cultivation, or what a Buddha, you would say, has reached the point where all these discriminations and markers are gone. There's no mediating lens that creates that sort of thing. And the end of this wonderful passage, the Avatamsaka says, don't try to think this out. It says, this can be experienced but not explained. It has to be directly known, but it's known through the reduction of any filters, any klesha, any afflictions, any cravings or whatnot, or doubts or fears. So this is where he's going here. You could say also it's see, I don't like, people say samadhi is single-minded, single-pointedness, fixed mind. But actually, that isn't what samadhi is. Samadhi results from bringing the mind into the here and now. And of course, one of those techniques is to bring it to singleness. You bring the 10,000 scattered things down to one. But the one is not samadhi. The one is just the threshold of samadhi, where then the mind goes into a how should I say it? It's like a unattached, heightened awareness. It's a heightened awareness that is nowhere fixed. It is everywhere engaged. It says, wisdom everywhere examines, yet is forever still. So people mistake the samadhi as, I'm doing samadhi practice and I'm bringing my concentration and focus down to one thing. And it's sometimes called shamatha. Okay? But that is just a technique. It's an inducement, if you want to use it, to try to open up a far more expansive awareness of the mind that is beyond discriminatory reaching out and grasping. So you got to really understand, because some people mistake that concentration for actual awakening, and it's not. So there's in these texts, they talk about all kinds of samadhis. So it's not like one kind of samadhi. There's one samadhi, I just mentioned one, the sameness of the 3 periods of time samadhi. There's a samadhi called the level equality of all dharmas. There's a particular samadhi, I think it's the lion sprint samadhi. There's let's see, Lion Sprint. He has one called the single practice samadhi, the I Ching San Mei. So basically, what these are just particular focused, heightened awareness that is allowed to examine things in depth in a field of inquiry, and then use it. So the Buddha will use different samadhis to speak to different people, to different assemblies at different times. These are the ones that come and go. It's sort of like, today I'm going to use this samadhi to get into your space and whatnot. And you're going to require a different kind of samadhi because you're in a different field of awareness and so forth. And the Buddhas come and go from this, and the texts describe it as just incredible because they just enter, leave, and but then there's a deeper samadhi called the nature and samadhi, which is no coming and going. It's 24/7, a heightened awareness that is unattached, ungrasping, and not setting up, and yet not closing down. So this is what's being described here. The Buddha comes to pay a particular attention to the state of the disciple. I told you the story. It's really kind of interesting. When I was traveling with my teacher in Malaysia, and we got picked up by a cabbie who recognized that, he's a Buddhist. And he said, gee, there's so many Buddhists that come in and out of the airport here. I've seen them in this colored robe and that colored robe and different colored robes. And he said, the last ones that came in, I asked them how many Buddhists there are. And they said, one Buddha. There's one Buddha. And that was Shakyamuni Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, who became Buddha. And he said, okay. And then he picked up another group and asked how many Buddhas there were. And he said, limitless Buddhas like motes of dust. And so the cabbie was going, you're a Buddhist too, aren't you? And the master said, you could say that. And so he said, how is it? How many are there? Is there one, or is there limitless like motes of dust? And, without losing a pace, Master Hua said, well, basically, there's not even one. And the cabbie said, what? He says, there's just great wisdom. And the cabbie, you could just see, it just kind of sunk into me too. I was like, what would I say? I was hoping, because the master often said, don't ask me, my students are so much smarter than I am. Asked him, and it didn't fortunately ask me, but I wouldn't have thought to give that kind of answer. But it's a very interesting answer. When it says all Buddhas are not, it's referring back to this state. And when that state, it's the same. It's not like there's any distinction.
And was that your master's attempt to contextualize the question back to the taxi driver? Was that?
I think he was going back. He was cutting behind the vehicles and saying there's that vehicle, this vehicle, that vehicle. He was giving a very deep teaching in a very simple way for the cabbie to understand. And the cabbie would then go, wait a minute, I shouldn't be looking at which teachers to follow. I should be looking at where's great wisdom. So in his own way, it brought him back. A similar case happened once. We were in an assembly, and there was someone who was really into specificity of facts regarding the Dharma and the Buddha. And so we were reading a text, and something was going on. He said, Master, there's one tradition that said the Buddha was born in da-da-da BCE, blah, 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 and died so-and-so. Another tradition said he was born BDD and died so-and-so. And now the new research suggests that neither of those are right. There's still a third. So exactly when was Buddha born and when he was died? And he was really into this. And the master said, very good question. I'll try to answer that if you can tell me when you were born and when you die. And what was it like before you were born and what happens after you die? And he said, don't worry about the Buddha's birth and death. And so again, you put it back into where are you going with this? Because even if you knew when the Buddha born or died, what would it matter to the ending of your own confusion and suffering and so forth? But it was done in a playful way. It wasn't, and it's sort of like, he went like, yeah, checked again, but checked in the sense of brought back to the real ground again. And so often what I'm saying, that's the medicine for the particular time. Now that might not be a good answer, or appropriate answer to a different time, different place for a different person. So going back to your point of what you said, it was purposeful contradiction, could be more like skillful medication and so forth. You could go in and say, I went into Kaiser today and I had a splitting headache. okay? And they gave me some Tylenol and told me to go home. And you went into Kaiser today and had a splitting headache, and they put you in an MRI and then went into immediate surgery to get a tumor out. And I'm saying, that's a contradiction. We both had headaches. How come he got that and I got this? And you say, no, you both had headaches. However, the cure, the remedy for mine was Tylenol, yours was surgery. And a third person comes in, hey, you don't get Tylenol, you don't get surgery. You get sent to the psychologist who says, look, you're all stressed out. What? I think it's a tumor. No, it's not a tumor. You're just hyper stressed. And so seemingly same thing. And you could say, if you looked at it from afar, if you're looking for the ideology of medicine, you'd say contradiction. Or you'd look at, no, totally appropriate diagnosis and different treatment and different prognosis and so forth. So that technique is a hermeneutical device, in other words, a device of interpretation that comes from the text itself. You can see from that quote, the Buddha says, I'm like a physician. Don't look for philosophic or ideological rigidity and consistency unless you have philosophic, ideological, fixed people. Like, I grew up with 3 sisters. They had the same name, same family. They weren't at all the same. And even today, I have to be very careful saying one thing to one and one to the other. And what they like and what they don't like, and just not in terms of food and clothes, and of course their husbands. Whoa! It's like all over the map. And you say, okay, so if people are like that, what would be the right teaching? You have to, really gear it for that person at that time in that situation. I'm gonna stop here tonight, but I'm saying there's one important thing in this text that'll be coming up where the Buddha says, now that's true. However, you can't be skillful at doing this medicine unless you understand where it's all going back to. Because you could think you're doing the right thing in the right situation, but you don't know it's all leading to this very profound state where there's not one thing to get, nothing to attain. Therefore, you can expediently set up, because sometimes you'll set up something. There's a word, I think it's iatrogenic. It's a Greek word, but it means the medicine that you give actually creates more illness. It's an expression that's really interesting, because given at the wrong medicine given can not only not cure, but it can create its own illness, its own factors. So the Sixth Patriarch saying, only when you've reached the place where you know everything's basically empty and there's nothing to attain, and you have that joy and free-flowing liberation, can you then skillfully set up these expedients, because you know it's leading to where. But if you don't know leading to where, you really can't do that yet. So obviously Hui Neng is doing this to some degree here, with some skill, and it looks so simple. Oh, he didn't bow, he just did this and he said that. But believe me, it's anything but simple when the skill hasn't arrived. So anyhow, tonight's our last class for this semester. We're finishing up, and I think we'll start when again? January. 27th, about the 27th of January. So, boy, that's a good 5 or 6 weeks for all of you. But I would encourage you, obviously, try to have some daily practice that you do, even if it's 15, 20 minutes of quiet sitting. And also try to take a text like this and just read a couple lines or 2 a day, and just let them work into your reflections and consciousness. Habit energies are very strong. There's good habit energy and bad habit energies. And once they're set in motion, they're hard to change. And that's the value of impermanence, in the sense that they can be changed. So bad ones are hard to change, but if you establish good ones, they're hard to change too. And so if you get into some practice of some daily mindfulness, contemplation, and a little bit of reading of this text to balance all the other input, by the time 6 weeks or 7 roll around, you'll not miss a step. On the converse, if you just outflow for 6 weeks and come back, you may not even be able to find this place. Is there some announcements?
So
You shouldn't introduce yourself. I don't think everybody knows you.
My name is Jing Chuan. I'm one of the resident monks here, and I think I actually know most people. We wanted to announce something, a movie coming up that's very relevant to the Sixth Patriarch Sutra. It's a monastery called True Suchness Monastery. The movie title is One Mind, and a movie producer named Ted Berger. I don't know if people have seen the movie Amongst White Clouds. Made it recently, just finished, and it's going to have a kind of a premiere showing on December 18th at 6:30 in San Rafael, in the Rafael Film Center, which is the home of the Buddhist Film Foundation. So if you're interested, we have little flyers here. It's actually, you could say, one of the most, not the word serious, but most vigorous Zen or Chan monasteries in China. They grow their own rice to support the meditators in the hall, where they meditate pretty much all day long, and they actually live in the hall. Their little beds are behind their meditation cushion. So they get out of their bed, they sit down on their cushion, and they go back. So the living space is just a little bit of space right behind their meditation cushion. That's their whole life, meditating and watching their mind. So there's very potentially that lifestyle and the stories we're seeing is the kind of background of these monks coming to visit the Sixth Patriarch. So if people are interested, Reverend Hung Sure will be there with Ted Berger, the director, to answer questions and give context and explain what's going on. So that's really an opportunity. December 18th at 6:30 p.m. If you have any questions, come talk to us. We're really trying to encourage people to go and support the movie. It's not one of those movies that will become really popular, obviously. It doesn't excite the senses. It's very slow. It helps with your samadhi. You can say that. You watch monks meditate. Whoa, he's meditating.
An eyebrow move.
Yeah. He's chopping wood.
Maybe you could just announce a schedule during the break here. What's happening?
Yeah, so
what's the daily schedule for people?
We still have a regular meditation sits every day here. So if you're interested in continuing your meditation practice, 6:15 to 7:15 in the morning, and 5:15 to 6:15 in the afternoon. We're having an Amitabha session starting tomorrow evening for 1 week to December 17th. And following that, there'll be 3 weeks of Chan at the City of 10,000 Buddhas. So if you really want to actually, apply your effort in your practice, you can do that. Otherwise, we're considering doing maybe something on the Saturdays here. We might need to talk to some of the people who help organize this. If we're interested, we might be able to put some meditation kind of day-longs on our Saturday, like maybe December 31st and January 7th. So if you're interested, you can let us know. We're kind of talking to the monastery staff to see if we can support that as of right now. So that's currently the schedule. And then I think you said January 27th, this class will start again?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So is there anything else I'm missing? That's it, I think. Yeah. Oh yeah. So we'll have tomorrow we'll have a regular day here, but in the evenings, Dharma Master Jing Xiang and Dharma Master Jing Kai, 2 nuns for the 10,000 Buddhas, will be coming down to give the Saturday night lecture. Reverend Hung Sure will be going up to Sudana Center in Ukiah doing a retreat on adulting in the Dharma, trying to grow up in the Dharma. So yeah. So I think that's it. I just wanted to let people know what's happening.
We'll do the transference. Now, you want to lead the transference? Or? We're doing the
shorter English one?
I don't know if it's shorter. It's the
longer one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. May every living being, our minds as one and radiant with light, share the fruits of peace
If people hear and see, our hands and hearts can find in giving unity. May our minds awake to great compassion, wisdom, and to joy. May kindness find reward. May all who sorrow leave their grief and pain. May this boundless light break the darkness of their endless night. Because our hearts are one, this world of pain turns into paradise. May all become compassionate and wise. May all become compassionate and wise.
With respect to the Triple Jewel.